Very good. So we are, what is going on now? Yeah, let me make sure I have the right passage. This should be from Genesis, and of course, continuing vaYera. I trust that you all see that. Are you all in? Hello?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Good. All right, excellent. So here we go. This, of course, is talking about, I'll make the bracha for this. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. And once again, this moment when God appears to Abraham prior to the destruction of the cities of the plains, Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, Tzvoim, and Zoar. They're actually 5 cities. And in a way, he's talking to his court, his angelic court, the way it's being placed here about Abraham and why he wants to reveal to Abraham what he's about to do. And parenthetically, he says, for Avraham hayohiye lagoy gadol, that Abraham is going to be a great nation, va'atzum, mighty, powerful, v'nivruchuvo, and through him will be blessed, kol goyei haaretz, all the nations of the earth. So, let's fake this. Make sure. Oh, okay. Before we actually get into that verse, we were in the middle of another verse, of the previous verse, which talked about the fact that after you mention the name of a tzaddik, you need to add words of blessing, and that is because when God mentions about Abraham, he talks about the fact. Let's see where it is here. Yeah, it's actually this verse, in this verse 18, where he says this. He basically is blessing Abraham in mentioning this. And so we had discussed, just started the underneath the Torah Temimah about this idea. So let's take a look. So I will tell you here that I had to really dig deep to understand what was going on here and the point that Rabbi Baruch Halevi Epstein was making here about this. In other words, what he's going to do, I'll actually anticipate it for you, is to what degree is this in fact necessary? Is it simply a nice custom, or is there more to it than that? And that's what we're going to look at. So I think you can probably figure out the answer to that question already. So it says, V'yein, take a look, b'she'elot u'tshuvot, in the responsa of Mahari Mintz, of the Mahari Mintz. The Mahari Mintz, here we go, I took a look, 1405 to 1508, Judah ben Eliezer, that's the Yud of Mahari, Yehuda. Ben Eliezer Halevi Mintz, also known as Mahari Mintz, was a prominent Italian rabbi of his time. As his surname suggests, he emigrated around 1462, forgive me, from Mainz to Italy. So going on. So he left this book, right, about his responsum. Siman Yud Gimel, so it must be like chapter 13 or paragraph 13, Katav. This is what he wrote. He says, I'm going to actually quote him. Gam Natan, okay, that is, and who is the one? He's making a reference to Hagon Mahari Margoliot. He is referring to the Morenu Harav Rabbi and Yaakov Margoliot. So J. Margoliot of Nuremberg, again, 15th century, German rabbi and halachic authority. We have this amazing tradition, right, of great scholarship and a lot of, thank God, writings that have been preserved all down to our time. So he says, V'zeh Gam Natan. So he's referring now to someone else here. Hagaon Mahari Margoliot. He says that he says that the sage, the Mahari Margoliot, gave a curse. You'll see, right? Natan, he gave al Mahararif. Who's the Mahararif? Another authority. So here we go. The nickname Maharif or Marif most often refers to Rabbi Yaakov Faraji, Although this doesn't make sense to me because it's late, so it must be wrong. I must think this is wrong. Look at those dates. So I'll have to see but that's what it gave me when I looked it up. Halachic arbiter in Alexandria, Egypt, unless those dates are wrong. He authorized a famous book of response on Marif, which summarizes halachic opinions. So it cannot be. So there's also a much earlier rabbi, but it's so unlikely that it's referring to the Al-Fasi. The Al-Fasi wrote the first, so he would be very early, but it's hard to believe that he would get criticized like this. So it could be. The Rif is known. Most people know the Rif as Al-Fasi. You'll find him in editions, certain editions, full editions of the Vilna Shas, of the Babylonian Talmud, published in Vilna. And essentially, he is the first, one of the earliest people to start creating what would eventually become the codification and the halachic books. So essentially, what he does is he strings passages from the Talmud in a way where you see what the halacha is, and on occasion he will fill in himself certain comments and ideas. But the Talmud itself is not a book of halacha. It's not a law book. It's a book of discussions and arguments in terms of trying to refine what is stated in the Mishnah, trying to get a better understanding and a deeper understanding and a more perfect understanding of the oral tradition. And so books such as the Shulchan Aruch and Maimonides' Code of Jewish Law came much later on in the process. So maybe it is. Maybe he is referring to do this, and maybe we are talking about the Rif. But look at this. Placed a curse, de Rabbanan, a rabbinic curse. Shehare, because in fact, lo hiskir etz lo sheyichle. Okay, so wait a second. Yeah, apparently it's saying he did not he did not mention regarding him. I'm trying to think. I'm not trying to. Forgive me, I'm trying to puzzle this out. I'm wondering. So he again. Um, so it's saying, so the Mahari Mintz mentions that the Mahari Margoliot placed a curse on the Mahararif. Okay. Why? Shehare lo hisker etzlo, because he didn't mention in regard to I think he's referring to the Margol. Let's see. Yeah, we're talking about the Margoliot. He did not mention regarding him lo sheyichle. In other words, he didn't mention after his name. He didn't say sheyichye, right? That he should remain alive. The law, here we go. We gave this up earlier on, right? Israel tzaddik v'yashar. This is actually a tzaddik. It looks like a nun, but I think it's a misprinted Israel tzaddik v'yashar. Kaminhag, according to the tradition, ad kan lashono. And that's the quote, right? So that's the quote from the Mahari Mintz. Ulefi shebe'arnu. And according to what we have explained, this is, of course, Torah Temimah saying this, Hu lo rak minhag. According to that, we cannot just consider this a custom, a nice thing to do. Eladina gemara, right? But we have to think that this is considered actually a law, a halacha, that you do this. V'yein od lefanenu, and see further before us, la'el. Okay, so this is above the Parshat Lech, right? That it's set before us above in Parsha Lech Lecha, in the Lech Lecha Parsha. That's the Parsha that starts Genesis chapter 12. So it's the earlier Parsha, the one that precedes the one we're in. The Pasuk, V'Hashem Amar El Abraham, the Lord said to Abraham, etc. This is chapter 13. I think we're going to have to think this is verse 14. Uvisamuch, and next to it, Pasuk Yutet, and that would be verse 19. So he's simply saying there's more to this than may meet the eye. And while this may seem somewhat relatively easy, I can tell you that I struggled for quite a bit and, of course, did not catch that date issue when I was studying this, just to try and understand the point that he was making here. Now, we get onto something else that some of you may find familiar. Here we go. So this is the next verse, right? Avraham hayohi, and Abraham, we can try and translate, will certainly be, right? Yoyeh, the goy gadol vatzum, that he and great, and remember, and that all the nations of the earth will be blessed through him. Rabbi Nachman b'shem Rabbi Mana Amar. So Rabbi Nachman, in the name of Rabbi Mana, said, Ein ha'olam lachol litkayem. It is not possible for the world to endure, b'pachot mishloshim tzaddikim, with less than 30 righteous people. Have to be at least 30 righteous people in the world, ka'Avraham Avinu, like Abraham, our father. If they're less than 30 righteous, the world will not endure. My Tama, and what's the reason? For Avraham hayo yiyeh, because it says Abraham hayo yiyeh. So he says, if you look at the word yiyeh, 10, 5, 10, 5. So there's 30, right? But Gemiratia, in the Gematria, Shloshim, it is 30 in Gematria. So you've heard of 36, I'm sure, of 36 righteous men. There'll be a mention of that, but here it's 30. Okay, and this is from the Talmud Yerushalmi Avodah Zarah, Tractate Avodah Zarah, chapter 2, halacha aleph. Okay, so let's take a look here. Lamed Tet. Let's find it here, right here. Yitachen, it would appear, to midayek v'darish, that he's taking particular note, right? And he interprets al derech remez, that this is an allusion. He's not saying this is a direct interpretation of this verse. It's not the meaning of the verse. It's an allusion. There's a suggestion in this verse of this particular thing. So it's one of the ways, right? It's one of the 4 ways of biblical interpretation, and that is remez, that's allusion, and that's very often involves gematria or abbreviations. They had the beginning acronyms formed out of words, and a word being formed there. You'll see, but that's the method he's saying. But samach, and what's he relying on? Kefal halashon hayoyeh. He is relying on the fact that the syntax here uses this phrase hayo yihiyeh, demore, because it hayo and yihiyeh, this implies or teaches, it expresses al hoveh ve'al atid. It is hayo is present, right? Yihiyeh, future. V'daresh, and so he interprets this shahavaya, right? That the existence, right, the presence of the world here, le'olam b'tminut, will be forever, right? It'll perpetuate. The ka'ain, right? That's certainly the straightforward meaning, right? When God says about Abraham, hayo tiyeh, and that's why we'll sometimes translate these duplications as being an expression, right? An intensive form, right? Will surely be, right? Uke'ein didarshinan ba'alma. And this is similar to how we will normally interpret halashon yiyeh. We very often will interpret this word yiyeh, b'haviyato yehe. Haviyato means its existence, right? Its actuality. It will be, it should be in its actuality, or it is. This is what happens. This is its existence. The imze, and together with this, Diek Tor Hamilah Avraham, he makes a point about the fact that the word Avraham, and Abraham, is yitur. It means it's unnecessary. It's pleonastic. The verse didn't have to say, and Abraham, why? To die hayalomar, because it would have been okay. We would have understood exactly the same thing had the verse said, Vahu hayoyeh. If it said, and he, right? The beginning of this statement started about Abraham, and we knew God was talking about Abraham, and here this pronoun, right, would have been just fine, and he certainly will be. And it says Avraham. So, and someone like Avraham then is how we're understanding this. Kevan demine salik, right? And the reason is since it comes from him, it arises from him. V'darish, and so he explains, for Avraham here, so that Abraham here 30 shloshim, the goy gadol, as a great nation. The goy elu Yisrael, and this goy that we're talking about, this nation, is referring to Israel, the Jewish people, right? U'mesayem b'Yerushalmi, and if you look at the discussion in the Yerushalmi itself, this particular passage ends, Pa'amim shiruvan be'el Yisrael, be'umatim be'Bavel. So it's saying when it says there are times when most of the Jewish people are living in the land of Israel, and a few of them living in Babylonia. Upa'amim shirovam bevavel. In other words, I think he's saying here about the tzaddikim, right? That they are living in, sometimes the majority are living in Babylonia, sometimes, well, he just said majority living in Israel. Upa'amim shirovam bevavel umatim be'Israel. And sometimes most of them are in Babylonia, and a few of them are in the land of Israel. He says, check out the Babylonian Talmud, Sukkah Memhe, in the tractate Sukkah, page 45b, Al Girsa Be'inyan Zeh, that when it talks about this particular topic, Lamed Vav Tzadikim, it talks about 36 righteous people. So they have to do the mathematics a little bit differently. But there is where we get this idea of there being 36 righteous people in the world. Chulin, and also there's a tractate Chulin, Tzaddik Bet, that's page 92a. Ita, it says there, Ha'olam mitkayem al mem he tzaddikim, that the world endures by means of 45 righteous people. Shloshim be'eretz Yisrael, 30 in the land of Israel, ve'tetvav bevavel, and 15 in Babylonia, v'drashot shonothem. And there are different interpretations, right? They arrive at these numbers through different ways of interpreting, possibly different in verses. It's interpreting different verses. Could be that I don't know that it's necessarily talking about this particular verse, etc. But this idea of the world enduring, even though there are so many. Yes, question, David.
Yeah, so maybe I missed it, but in the actual Torah, where is the idea around, X number of people, the X number of righteous? I mean, these are the interpretations, but what passage actually indicates that is, yeah.
There's no, as he says at the very beginning, it's merely an allusion. It's not that the Torah says it explicitly. But we know that the concept of righteous behavior is a very profound topic in the Torah. That the Torah, in being a book of instruction, is trying to instruct us as to how to live righteous lives of righteousness. And I especially these days, I'm very conscious of the fact that it's so easy to slip off and to allow one's one's feelings, etc., emotions, etc., to one's id, right, to carry the day, and that's why you have the Torah to try and help us overcome these things. I think I think that in that sense, this is what the point of this being is that God's standards of allowing the world to endure. In other words, we have this whole idea of the question is, do human beings deserve to have the world operate the way it does? Do we deserve the world in which we live? that I think is a profound question. Do we deserve it? And saying that God loves humanity and this world which is of divine origin so much that all he asks for is so many. I mean, look at how many million people live, and yet God is saying, the world is worth enduring for a very, very tiny, tiny proportion. And I think it's also possibly, I mean, one can meditate on these ideas and, you can become cynical, etc. Or you can say, even if they're just a few people that are really good, it's not worth being cynical about. The very fact that this number exists. And I think there are many sort of, I think, a good number of inferences in this particular comment about, what our expectations should be. And yes, we really do need to strive. In other words, the very fact that the world will endure, to know that the world will endure because you, even as an individual, one of 30 or 36 or 45, right, that you and simply a small group of other people allow the world to endure because you yourself are doing everything you can to act as a righteous human being. And it's not easy. It's not easy. There are many demons in this world, many temptations. And as I said, it's so easy to fall off. And I think that's sort of behind, at least that's how I personally look at a statement such as this. In other words, it's one thing to sort of look at the simple interpretation, and then it's another thing to say, well, what lies behind this kind of statement? And it's really saying, truly, you want to try. And the fact that you may be a very, very small minority should not deter you from the effort.
That helps. So it's really an illusion, kind of. I mean, basically, justifying our existence, right? I mean, this is what we really come up with is if
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, that's kind of what you're saying is if we all try and I mean, maybe there's not 30 to 40. I mean, but if everybody collectively creates that, or however you want to count 30 to 45 people, righteous people, then we wind up having the justification for our continued existence, right? I mean,
Yes, that's what it's saying. Yes.
okay, got
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. So, and of course, the Torah itself is trying to, with its laws and its ideas, etc., is trying to help us understand what it takes to do that job. Sometimes I like to interpret the Jewish practice as, how can I put it, a manual to become an angel. That's for us to become angels, because essentially that's what it is. It takes trying to respond to divine command. So it's how we do it here. Oh, okay. We are out of time. So I will stop here, and God willing, we will continue on this tomorrow. And so I'll stop the share. And unless you have anything else you want to say for the record, I will stop the recording. All right, I will stop.